Welcome to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, everybody. I'm Ryan Thomas. I am your host, recording live in Lockport, New York, just outside of Buffalo. I am excited to get the show started today. Unfortunately, the majority of what I'll be talking about today touches on the passing of two iconic figures in their very own right. One on the opposite end of the spectrum than the other. Jose Fernandez and Arnold Palmer, two legends of their sport. One was, on the cusp of greatness. The other one achieved greatness in his respective sport in golf. And really, I want to talk about Jose Fernandez first, because that was the first news that I had heard yesterday morning. I went to Buffalo last night, went out with some friends. The phone died, and as soon as I plugged it in, I was entering the final day of my fantasy baseball championship, which I was able to pull off, winning that. And Jose Fernandez was on my fantasy baseball team. Yahoo Sports sent me a notification saying that Jose Fernandez was day-to-day, and I didn't remember him getting hurt. So I just kind of ignored it. And then I went on Facebook, and the first thing that I saw immediately thereafter was that Jose Fernandez had passed away in a boat accident. His boat crashed on the Miami Beach shores, or pier, or whatever you want to call it, where it wasn't just him that lost his life. It was two others that were on the boat that lost their lives. And immediately when I had heard the news, I was in real shock, because as a fan and as a sports writer, I have a tough time sometimes looking at these athletes as human beings. I look at them as athletes. And to know that they are just as vulnerable as we are as human beings, that their life is just as fragile as ours is, it was really just humbling, in a deep, disturbing way, that a guy that young, that was on the cusp of so much greatness, 181 innings pitched this season. He led the league in strikeouts with 253. He was on his way to leading the league in strikeouts by the end of the season. Was coming off a start earlier in the week where he had pitched 8 innings, struck out 12, won the game. A batter did not reach second the entire game. That's the dominance that Jose Fernandez was on the cusp of. 24 years old. I am 24 years old as well, so this story really affected me deeply. To know what he meant to the Cuban community, to the country, to defect from Cuba in the way that he was forced to, the way that all went down, the story of him jumping off a ship to save a woman that was drowning in the Gulf, and then he pulled her out of the water, and it was his mother, and he didn't even know it. Very emotional, it really, to not know, you don't even know these athletes, but for something like that to happen to somebody that was on the cusp of something great, and to not see him fully achieve that in his own right, for everything he worked for everything he worked towards leading up to this moment of his dominance in the major leagues, and on a team that really hasn't done a whole lot the last few years, on a team that has kind of let down their fans, for the lack of a better term, the last few years with the complete fire sales of their team. Jose Fernandez was that shining light of the Miami Marlins, and he was the shining light of Cuban Americans, people that wanted an opportunity, people that wanted to live their life full of freedom, and he got that chance to do that. And he really showed appreciation for his countries, for both Cuba and the United States. There was a story of the Fort Bragg game where the Marlins played the Braves at Fort Bragg, and he took the American flag that was used during the anthem and brought it to each dugout, both the Miami Marlins and the Atlanta Braves, and had the teams sign it and give it to the troops at Fort Bragg. And in light of all the stories with the Kaepernick stuff and the NFL players protesting, that just shows the appreciation that this guy had for this country, for the opportunities that he was able to achieve while being a citizen of America. And that's something that is really lost on a lot of people lately. And I still am just in shock of that news. It's a devastating blow to not just the Miami Marlins organization, but Major League Baseball, to have a guy like that was on the cusp of such greatness, and to see his career end in tragedy. It's something that can't be explained. But what I do know is that his legacy in Cuba and America and in the game of baseball is never going to waver. We'll never forget about this guy. He'll always be somebody that we can look back on and say that guy was one of the up-and-coming talents of the game. I put him in my preseason starting pitching power rankings. I put him second to Clayton Kershaw. And at 24 years old, to put him that close to a guy that's been as dominant as Clayton Kershaw has been the last few years, that really shows what I saw in him as a pitcher, and just his ability to shut guys down, to neutralize guys, to really show pure emotion within the game of baseball. And some guys refrain from doing that, but he was someone that wore his heart on his sleeve. He really enjoyed the game, and he will be missed. Rest in peace, Jose Fernandez. On to the legend that was Arnold Palmer, the legend that is Arnold Palmer, I should say. One of the greatest golfers of all time, and for my money, he is the most important golfer of all time, because without a guy like Arnold Palmer, you don't have the glory that golf was able to build off of, that puts it in the status that it does today. I'm not the biggest golfing fan. I don't play golf. I do watch the Masters. I do watch the tournaments. Without guys like Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, and Gary Player, you don't have the intrigue within the sport of golf. And Arnold Palmer provided fans with that intrigue. And he was a real professional in every sense of the word. A guy that was dedicated to his craft on the course and dedicated to his craft as a man off the course. He appreciated the fans of the sport. He appreciated people that wanted to learn the sport. He was the most important figure, I would say, in the history of golf. While Jack Nicklaus might have, just as many majors or, whatever you want to call it, they call him the Golden Bear. I would say Arnold Palmer was the most important figure in the history of golf. And it's insane to me that, Jose Fernandez passed away. He has a legacy that wasn't fulfilled. And in the same day, Arnold Palmer has a legacy that was fulfilled, and he passed away the same day. It's really two completely opposite feelings, opposite emotions. You obviously, they'll be remembered forever. One was a tragedy where a young life was lost. The other was a figure that we will never see again. We'll never see the likes of an Arnold Palmer in the history of golf. And, hopefully they both are remembered for, many, many years to come. In more exciting news on a non-somber note, the Buffalo Bills were able to pull off a victory yesterday, versus the Arizona Cardinals. It was one that I picked to happen, so I got some money coming my way. I also expected them to win because this is the Buffalo Bills we're talking about. Chris Berman says nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. They proved that yesterday. They stepped up to the plate. Their defense, Rex and Rob Ryan's backs were against the wall. They proved that their defense does have a way of succeeding in this league still for one more week at least against one of the deepest rosters in the National Football League. Carson Palmer was just not on his groove. He looked uncomfortable the entire game. The Buffalo Bills secondary was really impressive in comparison to the disaster that was Week 2 versus the New York Jets. A great home win for the Buffalo Bills, 1-2, heading to Gillette Stadium to take on the New England Patriots. Who their quarterback will be, I do not know, but I am very excited to watch that game, to take in that game. I anticipate that, once again, Rex and Rob Ryan will go into this game with a lot to prove. Of all the naysayers about their defense post Week 2, post the disaster that was Week 2, they now have a little bit of a new lease on life, so to speak, and Rex and Rob Ryan definitely proved that they have the ways to game plan for an offense as deep as Arizona. Really, across the X's and besides the X's and O's, you were to look at this matchup on paper. If you looked at it on paper, you would see that the Bills were completely overmatched in every facet of the game versus the Arizona Cardinals. But the saying goes, any given Sunday, you can win, you can lose. And any given Sunday, no matter what the matchup was, the Buffalo Bills proved that on any given Sunday, if you make things happen, if you force a team to make mistakes, if you win the turnover battle, you will win the game. And that's what they did. Bills move on to 1-2. They got the New England Patriots, a big showdown with the Patriots, who are 3-0 without the basically poster boy of the NFL, Tom Brady. One more week without Tom Brady until he comes back, Week 5 versus the Cleveland Browns. I'm very excited to see who is going to be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. On 9 days rest, they're saying, they meaning the reports that I've read and seen, that Jimmy Garoppolo will probably be ready due to the fact that he has 9 days of rest, that he will start versus the Buffalo Bills. So I'm very excited to watch that game. Also, the Minnesota Vikings defeated the Carolina Panthers. That was a matchup that I found to be very interesting. Sam Bradford is looking very good in his time as the starter for the Minnesota Vikings. They just knocked off the Green Bay Packers. They just knocked off the Carolina Panthers. Two of the best teams in the NFL, two of the best teams in the NFC, and also another team in the NFC that is really making huge headlines is the Philadelphia Eagles. Shout out to offensive coordinator Frank Reich. Shout out to defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. Shout out to head coach Doug Peterson with what they are doing with every facet of their team. Carson Wentz looks like a budding star in the National Football League. Right now, my favorite to win the NFL Rookie of the Year. The guy can make every throw. The touchdown to Darren Sproles, the way he made that play happen, the way he was able to extend that play, provide time for Sproles to get free, throw him that dink pass, and Sproles did the rest. That is what an NFL quarterback is made of. That is not necessarily what I saw from Tyrod Taylor this past week. Even though it was a victory, LaShawn McCoy was really the one carrying the load for the Buffalo Bills defense. The stat line on Tyrod Taylor, 119 yards, an interception, and a rushing touchdown. The Buffalo Bills will eventually need him to do better in order to make the playoffs this season if they do believe that they have a fighting chance. 1-2 heading to New England. Heading to take on the New England Patriots. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take. Take care.